All right, we're going to go ahead and go over some material that's covered in chapter 1, which is research design. These are the different kinds of research designs that we use to collect information and be able to collect information from participants. And if you work in the experimental field, for example, you'll get to know all of these terms very, very well. But just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we talk about in terms of research. So we have three main research designs, main types of research design, and it's descriptive, correlational, and experimental. Descriptive research, this is something that is very, very well named because it is literally descriptive in nature. You can observe behavior, you can go out in the field and you can see what people are doing. You can in some cases do what's called naturalistic observation, where you're actually observing someone in their natural environment. In some cases, you would need ethical approval for that. In other cases, you actually don't need ethical approval. It just depends on what you're doing and how invasive you are. And so the interesting thing about descriptive research is that you can, of course, describe about people, describe things, describe behaviors, describe observations, but you can't prove anything. I do want to note that in science, you actually can't prove anything. The only thing that you can prove, essentially, is in math. And that's because in science, there's always going to be some variable that you can't control for. And so we actually only are able to disprove or provide evidence for. We actually are not able to prove anything in science. But we can try to get close to it, right? We can try to figure out what is going on. And descriptive research is a really good way, it's a really good type of research design when you're just trying to understand behavior in a sense to be able to describe it. But really, it does not give you a ton of information because it is limited in what it's able to do. So the next type of research design is called correlational research. Now, correlational research is something where you collect data, you collect information, and you want to understand the relationship between two variables or two things that change. Okay, so variables can be anything. They can be whatever information you're collecting and you're interested in. And so what we like to do with correlation is just to see how well these two things are related to each other. And with more advanced analyses, you can actually see if one predicts the other one. But it does not tell you anything, again, about variable A causing variable B. Same thing with descriptive research design. You cannot say that the observations that you've made cause anything. Okay, so two downsides here, okay, or two research designs with the downside. Correlational research and observational research designs both cannot demonstrate what we call causality. A causes B. We can only say an observational research design is that, oh, this is an observation, this is happening, and describe it. And then in correlational, we can only say that these two things are related in some way. So I'm going to give you guys an example. And if you look to the right here, you'll see that I have two graphs set up. So the top one, I've got two variables here. So let's say we're interested in the number of crimes that are committed, and we're also interested in ice cream sales. So this is over, a course of a day, let's say. So what we might notice is this is what we refer to as a scatter plot. Okay, so for every ice cream sale and every number of crime, or every crime committed, okay, numbers committed, we are going to have a point on our graph. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a few dots. Okay, and so let's say we notice there's a little pattern going here, and so it seems to be that. Okay, if we look at this on a particular scale, if this represents 0 crimes committed, and this represents, let's say, 100, okay, so I'm going to try to draw that out and make sure you can read it, okay, and let's say this in here, this scale is 0 ice cream sales, let's just say 100, just to make it nice and even, okay. if you notice this very interesting pattern, every single data point means that a particular ice cream was sold and a particular number of crimes were committed in that particular time. What you start noticing is that sometimes we can get sort of patterns here. And so in this case, we have a very nice line here. This is a terrible, let's see if I can get, let me actually draw a line. How about that? What you notice here is you've got a very interesting line. Now this is something we call a line of best fit, and it's whatever the dots, whatever pattern they make, it's sort of consolidated into a sort of shape. So here we can see that in this case, we have what we refer to as a positive. Okay, let me do this so that I can actually write. A positive relationship. Okay, so here we have a positive relationship because as the number of ice cream sales increase, the number of crimes committed increase. And we can also say the number of crimes increase as ice cream sales increase. So these are related in a positive way. Whenever you do correlation, you actually get a physical number. So what I'm going to do is show you guys kind of how this works. And so with correlation, you would get a number that represents the correlation, and we call this number the R, or the correlation coefficient, or the Pearson correlation coefficient, but it's represented as an R. And so in this case, I'm going to actually try to type on this, because I do have a Word document here. Don't mess this up. No, it's going to mess up. Let's see here. So in this case, let's say our R, okay, our R value, which is a lowercase r, so I'm going to make sure that this, I'm going to force us to do this. Let's say in this case, our R value, or Pearson correlation coefficient, is a 0.92. Okay, now a correlation runs from a -1 to 0 to a +1. The number represents the strength, and the negative or positive represents the direction. So this direction is a positive direction. Okay, so as one increases, the other increases, and this would be a positive. Okay, and this is a very strong. The closer to a nice line here, a nice angled line. Okay, the closer we are to a perfect relationship, and a perfect relationship is 1. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. That means it's perfect. It's as strong as it can get. A zero correlation would be a horizontal line, meaning there's nothing happening, okay? And a negative relationship would be, for example, let's draw this right here. The more alcoholic drinks you have, the more impaired you are. So the worse it is that you drive. So we say the less drinks you have, the better you can drive, okay? And we're going to draw a nice line here. And as you can see, this line actually goes down. And this represents a negative relationship. So in this case, we would have potentially a very strong yet negative relationship. So here our R might be, let's say our R is -92. See, it's the same strength, right? But in this case, we have a negative relationship. In this case, we have a positive relationship. So they're still strong, and they're still representing the same relationship in the sense of strength, but they are demonstrating two different things. So if we have a, let's just say, I'm going to draw this on here. We know it isn't, but let's just say we see line that goes this way. It's completely horizontal. If we had a whole bunch of dots that went like this, then we would essentially say that that's a 0, no correlation. There's nothing going on, okay? So example of a positive and a negative relationship, but there's something missing here. Now we know these two things are related here. Ice cream sales and number of crimes are related, and number of alcoholic drinks and ability to drive are related. This is a simpler, the bottom one is a simpler one to explain, but yet we can't still, because it's just a correlation. We cannot say that the number of alcoholic drinks causes inability to drive. We can't say that if it's just a correlation. If just a correlation is run, that is not something we can say. Just like we can't say that the number of crimes means that you're going to have more ice cream sales, or we can't say that ice cream is causing people to commit crimes. What the problem with correlation relationships are essentially is that there's always another variable or a set of variables that could be causing. So we have variable A, ice cream sales, variable B, number of crimes. What about variable C? What could be actually influencing those two variables? One thing influences both ice cream sales and number of crimes, and that is the temperature. So the temperature outside influences the ice cream sales. As the temperature outside increases, then more ice cream gets sold, and more likely that people are actually going to commit crimes, because as temperature increases, we become very uncomfortable and very agitated. And it's much more likely to see things like riots and crimes and break-ins and shootings and murders and all of that occurring during really hot days compared to much cooler days. So here we cannot say correlation equals causation, because there is a third variable that's actually influencing both of those things. So bad thing about correlation is essentially we cannot just demonstrate causation. Now, when it comes to a research design that can get to causation, A causing B, demonstrating cause and effect, is experimental design. This is the one design that trumps all the other designs, okay? This is the one that's actually going to go over, whoops, let me clear these drawings, okay? The one thing that's actually going to trump all of the other designs is research design, is experimental design. And experimental design is causality. A causes B. We can actually determine that because we influence what's being studied. We actually manipulate it. We control it. So we can demonstrate cause and effect. Remember, descriptive and correlational research design cannot demonstrate or establish cause and effect because they don't manipulate anything. All they do is watch, and all they do is collect. So because we can manipulate something in a controlled way with experimental design, we can actually demonstrate cause and effect. So we have two particular variable types. We have an independent variable, which is what we manipulate, and a dependent variable, which is dependent upon that manipulation. So let's say we have a group of students, and we want to see if we put them into a time management program, will that improve their grades? Well, the factor that we manipulate is if they get this time management program. So one group will get the time management program and one group will not get the time management program, okay? So the independent variable, or sometimes referred to as the IV, this is what we manipulate, whether or not they get the time management program, okay? Now, the group that gets the time management program, this is where we manipulate their experience. So they're the experimental group. The control group, in this case, is the group that did not get time management program. We're just monitoring them. They did not get anything. They did not get manipulated. All we're doing is we're monitoring to see what happens, okay? So they're basically our control group. We can use random assignment, which means that it doesn't matter what the student is good at. It doesn't matter if they're already good at time management. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what's going on. They're going to get randomly chosen to go in either the experimental group or control group. This is good because we don't want all the kids that are really, really good at time management in the time management group, because it's really not going to help them out. We want it spread, randomly throughout the design. So what we're measuring here is the grade. So the grade is going to be, we hope, okay, we think, dependent upon that time management program. Because the grades are going to be dependent upon the time management program, we refer to the grades as the dependent variable. So here, the first leg, the blue part, we're going to assign participants or students randomly to either the experimental group, which is the time management program group, or the control group, which is the no time management program group. And then we're going to do the program, okay, for the experimental group and just continue on like normal for the control group. And then at the very end, we're going to measure their grades. So we're going to see if those students who were in the time management program's grades improved compared to the control group, then we can say that our time management program caused them to have better grades. Now remember though, this can go any direction. It can go in the direction that the time management program doesn't improve their performance, their grade, in the sense that it actually makes them worse. Maybe our time management program really sucks and we're just really bad at designing programs. So it can actually make them worse, okay? Or let's say it does nothing at all. When we compare their grades to the control group, nothing's changed. That means that the time management program did not work. It didn't do harm, okay, but it didn't improve their grades. Now, when we consider what kinds of research that we're going to do in experimental work, we have to consider what kind of group of people are we going to look at. So one thing that's really fun to do is something called, I'm going to skip ahead, this is really fun to do, is longitudinal work. Longitudinal design means that you're looking at the long term. You're looking at the same group of people over a period of time. Let's say you're looking at 15-year-olds and you test them when they're 15, you test them when they're 16, and you test them when they're 17. So you actually look at the same people over a period of time and you can compare them directly to each other. And that's super fantastic because that's really awesome that you can actually make these comparisons. But the problem is people move, people drop out, people die. It's expensive to follow people. People decide they don't want to do it anymore. Okay, so the good thing about longitudinal is it tells us an absolute yes, this is a comparison between this person and their own self. Okay, you can get a bunch of information that way about development. The bad thing is, of course, is that you may not be able to get the same people over a really long period of time. Now, it's expensive and it's time consuming. Now, a way to get around that, something called cross-sectional research, which is essentially you study a big group of people. So let's say you study a whole high school. And in the high school, you separate them. You have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. And you compare them across each other. They're not the same people. So the freshmen compared to the seniors, they're going through different things. True, okay? But they're at the same point in time. So the good thing is that it's cheaper and it's faster, okay? But the bad thing is that you can't make direct comparisons over the same person because all you're doing is you're comparing different groups of people at the same time. So it's good and bad. Now, when we look about publishing work, of course, we want to do this experimental work and we want to collect data and we want to make sure that it all makes sense, but we also have to tell people about it and we have to disseminate it. So what we do essentially is publish in journals. We go to conferences and we do something that's field specific so that the people that are in the field, the other scientists, don't repeat the same mistakes that we have made and can build upon the research that we're doing. So I hope this has been a pretty good summation of the research design. There are plenty more slides in this show. You guys have access to this. I just want to go over the main important parts because these are really important. Another thing that to consider with experimental work is, of course, ethical consideration, making sure that what you're doing is ethically sound. And every single institution, including UVA-wise, all has their own ethical board whose job it is to make sure that the research that you're doing, for example, if you're doing experimental work, that it is in fact ethical to do on humans, or if you're doing work on animals, and that it makes sense and that it's safe. And you, of course, have to be approved with that before you can move forward with your design, and any changes that you make have to be reapproved by the board. This is made up of lots of different people, including professors, people of the normal community. It can be pastors, it can be lawyers, it can be doctors, it can be anybody that makes up the board. A good variety is important so that we can see ethical considerations from all different backgrounds. If you have any questions about research design, please feel free to email me or ask during the question forum. And hope you enjoyed the lecture.